back to the Daily Grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back pickle biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
UFC pound for pound #1 fighter in the world and current flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson continues to get cosigns from former UFC legends and arguable greatest of all times themselves. We saw before Demetrious Johnson's fight with Ray Borg and back before GSP's return, GSP came out and he also said this same thing Anderson Silva is now saying. They both have now said Demetrious Johnson is the #1 pound for pound fighter on the planet, and even though Anderson Silva is giving Demetrious Johnson this praise, Demetrious Johnson has also responded. But first, let's get into Anderson Silva and what he had to say about Demetrious Johnson. He said, you know, Demetrious Johnson is the new champion. He's the best one. I have my passion about my sport, and I love when I hear people talking about this. But Demetrious, people need to respect him because he's a great fighter, and I think Demetrious is the greatest fighter of all time. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, this is very interesting coming from Anderson Silva because what it sounds like what happened is, and it's according to TMZ, a TMZ reporter approached him and was like, yo, Anderson Silva, how do you feel about being the greatest fighter of all time? And clearly that's a casual fan because I don't know too many actual hardcore MMA fans that actually consider Anderson Silva even close to a GOAT at this point. I know Anderson Silva used to be revered in my eyes. He's the one of the main people that drew me to the UFC. Like, whenever Anderson Silva was like my Conor McGregor back in the day. I was like a fucking Anderson Silva stan. The only fights I really gave a fuck about was when Anderson Silva was on the card. I was in like high school. Yo, we all going to Buffalo Wild Wings or wherever, Hooters across the street, whichever one ain't too fucking packed and whichever one's got room, and we in that joint. So with that being said, I was a huge Anderson Silva fan, and I still am a huge Anderson Silva fan. It just sucks the way that he's went out, and the way that he has went out has just taken away, and it's not just me. I know this is a common consensus among the full-time family and just other people. Anderson Silva's legacy has definitely been fucking tarnished with his multiple USADA violations, and also he's on like a 3 or 4 fight losing streak. He was before the Derek Brunson fight, which was arguable. You know, a lot of people had Brunson winning that fight. So Anderson Silva back in the day, nothing to be fucked with. And Demetrious Johnson in his responses saying that as well. You know, he's like, yo, I appreciate Anderson Silva giving me the credit and all, but I'm not the greatest fighter of all time. I'm sure whenever Jon Jones comes back, he's gonna jump right above me. Oh, come on, dog. That ain't what I wanted to hear. Whenever I heard, you know, I thought Demetrious Johnson was just hitting him with the humble, like, oh, you know, fucking much respect, much appreciation to the legend, but I thought he was just keeping it humble. But then he threw in the motherfucking, let me pull it up. This is what he had to say. He said, it's always an honor when somebody like Anderson says something like that because of the status he's done and what he's done to mixed martial arts. It's amazing. I remember my first fight in the UFC. It was UFC 126, Anderson Silva versus Vitor Belfort. I was there. He was the main event. I like the guy, and I think he's had an amazing career, and he's still going. I don't put a lot of stockage in him calling me the GOAT because, like I told somebody, once Jon Jones becomes reinstated, I'm sure he's going to jump above me. Now, I don't know if he's talking about in the rankings or if he's talking about in Anderson Silva's mind. Like, just because Jon Jones gets reinstated, probably, you know, I don't see Anderson Silva saying, oh yeah, you guys remember how I told you guys Demetrious was the GOAT? Jon Jones is back. Hashtag free Jon Jones. He just skipped that nigga. I don't see Anderson Silva or GSP coming back out and saying, yeah, you know, we only said he's the GOAT until Jon Jones comes back. You know, I think you just take these cosigns where you can get them, you know what I'm saying? And, you know, just, hey, it is what it is. I've heard Demetrious Johnson, and I think I think Anderson Silva's right more than Demetrious Johnson. I do think Demetrious Johnson's pound for pound the #1 fighter on the planet, and I would go off of I have the stats to prove it. It's not a debate to me anymore. Those fucking MMA ELO rankings are legitimate as fuck, and I really don't care what you have to say. Out of active UFC fighters, Demetrious Johnson's #1. Above him are Jon Jones and GSP, but they're not active anymore. They are both out indefinitely. So until they come back, which is interesting because that's what Demetrious Johnson had to say. But out of active UFC fighters, Demetrious Johnson is pound for pound #1. I don't think anybody's ever just said, hey, he's the best to ever do it. And this is a whole nother thing, man. Like, whenever we talk about greatest of all time, I've thought about this recently. Why the fuck do we do it, bro? It's of all time. 20 years from now, there's going to be a young Thundercat that people are going to be saying, is he the greatest of all time? And then that's not even the case. Like, because 20 years after that, you see where the fuck I'm going? When you're talking about of all time, this conversation literally will never end and nobody will ever be right. You can't say Michael Jordan's the greatest of all time, you know, and it's not just about Kobe, LeBron. What about Wilt Chamberlain way back in the day? Well, what about the dudes that are in elementary right now that might be better than fucking Jordan and LeBron that are gonna beat both, you know what I'm saying? So this is really all interesting anyway. It's really all just the GOATs, you know, kind of giving each other, you know, Anderson Silva's giving Demetrious Johnson a big cosign here, and that is actually big. I mean, especially on a casual level. Like, for instance, and the TMZ guy ran up, and either he doesn't know about Anderson Silva's multiple failed drug test or his losing streak or whatever, but he, you know, he was probably casual like me back in the day and still is just super casual. He probably has Conor McGregor in super high regards, Anderson Silva, and he's probably can't wait for fucking Chael Sonnen versus Rampage Jackson this Saturday either. But to those people, this Anderson Silva cosign is big, because whenever someone runs up a random motherfucker like a TMZ guy, hey man, how does it feel to be the fucking GOAT? He could just eat up, you know, he didn't have to co-sign Demetrious Johnson, but that's dope to see Anderson Silva doing, man, especially for Demetrious Johnson, who needs all the help he can get, especially in the mind of the fans, because it is what it is. You guys know what's going on with Demetrious Johnson. For some reason, the fans don't draw to him, and I don't know what it is. I'm a huge fan of his fights. This motherfucker just pulled off a mighty bar in this last, you guys remember this? This is Ray Borg for this video. This nigga picked him up, motherfucking mighty barred him, bro. Fucking slammed the nigga into a fucking submission. What the fuck? With that being said, it is what it is. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. I'm out.
Bye, Felicia.